Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Frame. My name is Paul Loya. I'm the Deputy Director of Exhibitions and Collections here at the Long Beach Museum of Art. And today we are sitting here with Virginia Katz amongst her show Transitory Nature at our downtown campus on 3rd and Elm. So yeah, welcome, Virginia.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
No, it's wonderful to have you and sit amongst this show. And
It is.
yeah, the show has been a long time coming, and I think we did 2 studio visits before deciding to do the show, and I think we met. Was it during COVID we met, or after COVID?
I think it was during
Was
COVID.
it? Okay.
Yeah, maybe once before COVID, and
Okay.
then during, and then I ended up getting it, and then we had to postpone
right,
a few
yeah.
times, and
Yeah.
so anyway. But now we're beyond that.
Now we're
It's
beyond-
over.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful, and it's like wonderful how the show kind of took shape and evolved, and we're able to use these wonderful panels for viewers who haven't seen the show or visited yet. We have these large monoprints hanging on 6 to 5 foot structures that float throughout the space, and so it really gives this kind of ethereal kind of feeling to it. And so
Yeah.
you get to sit individually with each piece, which I think gives it a really wonderful feeling to the exhibition, and experiencing each work too as you see them at full scale. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially considering that the work is about space, landscape space, so I really like the idea of hanging each monoprint from the space itself, from the ceiling, and you can walk through it, and that part of the installation is really important too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's all elements. It's the imagery of the work, but it's also the installation and the titles and the symbology that's involved, and so it all comes together.
And I think like one of the interesting aspects of this, essentially there's 3 bodies of work that make up Transitory Nature, that make up this exhibition. You have the monoprints, you have the tissue, the watercolors on tissue, and then you have the 3D sculpture pieces behind us of the flowers. And I think one thing I loved about all 3 was your experimentation and discovery and exploration of the physicality of the paint medium. Can you kind of talk about that? Like where does that where does that fascination come from? Where does that interest come from to take paint and kind of push, work with it in such different iterations of it?
Well, for me, first and foremost, the work is about landscape
Right.
and our connection to it, and also the expression of it through the landscape painting tradition.
Yeah.
So, which has always been a two-dimensional perspective or practice. And I was interested in bringing the idea of form into that practice because landscape is three-dimensional. We're three-dimensional. We have form. We live within it. And I wanted to bring that idea to the work. And so approaching it from kind of a multifaceted perspective, which it is, and the landscape ranges from, or the spectrum of it ranges from 3 dimensions to the ephemeral.
Sure.
So I wanted to include that by focusing on the media and the media itself, and then from there the imagery developed and so on and so forth. So.
It's really cool. Yeah, it was like when we were visiting a studio, I saw these large monoprints that hung on your wall, and then you pulled out the tissue works, and and each one just like I was like, wow, this is and talking the thread of landscape going through all 3 of the works, and then you pulling you pulled out the 3D works, using the paint in that way. And I was
Right.
like, and how did that come about, using the paint in that way?
Well, again, the idea of three-dimensional
Yeah.
form. So it was important to me to work with, initially, the work began on panel where I used lots of thick acrylic paint and piled it on, so to speak, on the panel and then carved into it. And it's acrylic paint, so it dries pretty rapidly.
Right.
And then from there, the works got more and more individualized and more three-dimensional to the point where they separated from the panel,
Yeah.
intentionally on my part.
Yeah.
And then I started incorporating them into the landscape as well, so that they became fully immersed in that idea, to the point where there's you can't even determine that the art is there, because it's become so fully incorporated with the environment that there's really no distinguishing it.
Yeah.
And to me, that was a really exciting idea, that landscape painting can actually become landscape.
Right.
And it still is a really fascinating idea for me that I'm continuing to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, does and I think we spoke about this yesterday on the phone about land art, with Andy Goldsworthy and Robert Smithson's work. Did you have an interest in those?
Oh,
those
yeah.
artists,
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, 20 years ago, I was working with the idea of wind, those elements in the landscape that you can't really see, but are there. You can hear it, you can feel it. And I wanted to somehow try to capture that on paper.
Yeah.
So I tied strings to tree branches, and at the ends of the strings, I taped pens. And the paper was weighted on the ground, so when we had the Santa Ana conditions, the wind was the energy force that moved the branches and the strings, and so it kind of left its trace. So there's been a long progression of interacting with the space itself, which is one of the things that Robert Smithson was really interested in working with the space itself. And in a sort of dialectical format where he deconstructed. And he was interested in that, going back to not only a site, but taking it to the non-site when it wasn't what it was. I know that sounds a little bizarre, but his writings are pretty deep, and I really enjoy reading what he was thinking when he was developing his work. So, but I would say that one thing that we share is that he went to the landscape to develop his ideas and concepts, and I do the same. For me, that's where the source of everything is in the world and the space around us. And it's everything, and very important to me and in my work. Just
Do you like to write about your work? During after you're completing a body of work, or while you're doing a body of work, do you write about it?
Well, I write about it in terms of articulating what I'm thinking about and what's going on in a particular body of work. So in that regard, yes, and I find it to be really challenging. My undergraduate was in philosophy, so I tend to ruminate on something and try to make it as clear as I possibly can, and that's really, I'm sure any artist would tell you that it's not easy.
No.
It's really not easy to articulate your work and in a way that is clear and precise, but yet leaves room for what art is. And for me, art, there is no conclusion.
Right.
There's no one way, and that's what I really love about art.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. You studied philosophy. It was interesting. I was reading about Barnett Newman, and he was also a philosophy major as well.
Oh, he was? I didn't know that.
He studied philosophy and taught philosophy, and then then in his 30s discovered painting and kind of explored that way through surrealism, and then into his his zips eventually.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, how did you go from philosophy into art?
Art was always there for me, and my father, though, he was against it.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, "You can't do that; you'll starve." And in a way, he was right, actually. I mean, it's a really difficult profession, I think. And so many artists struggle and to try to keep their practice going and live, and so it's not easy. So I can appreciate where he was coming from, but I continue to make art throughout my life, and also loved studying philosophy. And the two just dovetailed so perfectly together that I still enjoy reading about conceptual art and philosophy and how that factors into my work. Whereas in my work, the concept is really important. It's really primary in my mind, and the process that goes about that I devise in order to realize the concept, it's all tied up in itself, and the artwork is kind of the realization of all of that. So the artwork is the result of that idea, which is also exciting for me. So it's still very much tied up into philosophical thinking, but yet the thing I love about art is you can depart from any logic if you want to. You can take liberties. You're not tied down to a certain structure, and that to me is really pretty much the way I work as well. So.
Did you ever have a moment, like during your study of art or during your lifetime, of like that opening up, where art did that for you, where it opened up, where you witnessed it with a body of work or a piece of artwork?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Sure, like when you saw an exhibition or a piece of artwork that really like opened up the liberation within art, the liberties that artists are taking to do that. Like there's not a specific route. Like for instance, when I first saw Basquiat painting, like that really opened up the doors to me. I was studying Van Gogh and Lucian Freud and a very figurative painting. And then when I saw Basquiat for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, like there's so many things, so many avenues you can take. It's not just being a teacher or a full-time painter. There's other things that you can do. There's so many liberties in art, in the art world.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, for me, I like looking at art and thinking about other connections that I can make. And in figurative painting, for example, Basquiat, and thinking about the artists that came before and come after. And I think that we're seeing a lot of like Basquiat kind of painting today. There's a lot of figurative art happening, and that style, kind of a loose, childlike way of painting. But anyway, I like thinking about the connections, like what came before and how that was influential and overlap, because I think that life doesn't exist in a vacuum, that there's always an antecedent, and it's kind of interesting to see how many connections you can draw to a certain kind of work and throughout art history and so forth. So
Absolutely.
I really enjoy that.
And was art always something that was around you, or did you have to seek it out growing up?
I would say I had to seek it out.
Yeah.
I grew up in upstate New York.
Right.
I was born in Brooklyn, but grew up in upstate New York, and my mother didn't drive, so we didn't really have a lot of access to museums and art shows and so forth. And I, as a young person, wanted to paint, and the only thing that was available to me really was the landscape. And so that's what I did.
Yeah.
So I did like little plein air paintings as a child.
Yeah.
And that always stayed with me, and actually it was a good way for me to develop skill in the painting process. And I did that through adulthood until I started recognizing that there were other activities in the environment that were there that you can't really observe, and then that's where those wind drawings came in. I could hear it and feel it. So I started thinking about that other aspect of landscape and trying to work with it. And then I did some mapping of the ocean tides and people and spaces, and it's taken a kind of a journey.
Yeah.
And this work in this show is my most recent. Well, recent, I would say, since 2010, have been developing some of these ideas. So, and even before that, in 2005, I started working with printmaking, and then the tissue paintings are the most recent iteration, but they have a lot to do with that ephemeral nature, impermanence, that idea of the non-site.
Yeah.
And so that's that. It's trying to present a broad picture of what landscape can be and what it is and
Yeah.
the potential of it, which is endless.
Yeah, I saw a video on YouTube and saw a video, you were working on these, but you weren't, it was in the monoprint, you were actually using, it was like oil pastel on it, on one of them, like applying oil pastel to
On the prints?
On the prints, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're monoprints, but I do go into them with drawing and painting.
Okay.
So whatever it takes, sometimes, I'll look at it and decide that that I want to work on it beyond the printmaking process.
Yeah.
And whatever that material or medium, takes, then I'll do it to complete the image.
Right.
But the idea behind these works, the monoprints and the relief piece in the back that you see, is using the horizon line as a symbol of transition, that idea of transitory nature,
Right.
and that when you think of color field painting, the shift from field to field is another idea of transition. And so that's why I wanted to use the horizon line in the landscape in these works to put that idea forward, that there is a change that takes place and life is in this continuum and it's never ending and always evolving. And that's what the idea behind the monoprints is, that transition, that shift from field to field. And then with the three-dimensional piece in the back, it's the same idea, this bush along my studio. There's a long fence, and there's a lot of bougainvillea that's planted all along the fence. And so I kind of watch it throughout the year. It goes through various periods of health, let's put it that way, and seasonal changes and so forth. And it became a metaphor for me with the entangled vines.
Right.
So that work is also symbolic of that. So the entanglement of those vines and flowers and leaves became another metaphor to think about our connection to landscape and the importance of nurturing that.
Yeah.
And then with the tissue paintings, the idea of using facial tissues to paint a landscape seems to me to be really appropriate right now. But even if it didn't have anything to do with climate change, I think that it's part of the story, and that life is transient, and it by allowing the tissues during the painting process to rip and tear, I thought was just another level and or layer of that idea in approaching the material from a painterly perspective.
Yeah, and they almost look like stone. One thing that I was fixated on was like the fact that they look like stone. The finish of them in a way, like they have like the
The texture of it. Yeah, the texture of a stone. Yeah.
I was like, it took me a while to figure out what exactly the material was that you were working on. So, yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
Why did you decide to use that? I know they're affixated to the wall with butterfly
needles?
pins. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. That to me is another layer of the work that, all these things come into play, not only the imagery, but the medium and the material, but the installation as well, that I wanted to suspend the tissue paintings on the wall in the most precarious way, that they're just barely hanging on to the wall, and that's another kind of way to approach the painting as well, that it's vicariously there. So, but yeah, the idea of letting the process take hold was really how I approached it. I had no preconceived intention for each painting. I just had an idea of the imagery and then just let the process take over.
Yeah.
I try to do that, to bring some other sort of truth to the
Yeah.
painting process
That's right.
beyond my intention,
Yeah.
and see what happens with the materials and allow that to have a voice.
Yeah. Yeah, because even with the monoprints too, right? You don't really have a lot of control over what the final outcome will be, correct?
No, that's
No?
absolutely correct. I mean, that's exciting. And when you work with process,
Yeah.
there's a certain amount that you have to let go of, and which has been a really valuable thing for me to do, not only in art making, but in life. You
Right.
know, you want certain things to go a certain way, and we have all these expectations, and I think it's a healthy approach to be able to just let go of it.
Yeah.
So I do try to do that in the work, is to let the materials and the ideas and the process and nature, and let it all come together and have a voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's wonderful.
yeah. But that's exciting though, is that there's an element of chance in
Right,
that
yeah.
process, that
Yeah.
no matter how, even if you go into it with certain ideas, the painting needs to be itself.
Right.
And it will let you know, and you just have to go with it. But yeah, I love that chance. You know, even like with the wind drawings, I set up the system, and I consider that work as a collaboration with the wind. And you set it up, but you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, in a lot of those drawings, they sometimes got loosened. I would wrap bricks with
Yeah.
towels, and then place the bricks along the paper to hold it down, because during a Santa Ana we can get some serious gusts.
Right, yeah.
And sometimes the wind was so strong that it carried the piece, and I had to go chase it down the street. So they got pretty beat up. They got some tears and
Yeah.
some scratching of the paper and scraping and maybe little holes here and there. And so, but yeah, that's part of it.
Right. Yeah. And then you did also a work with the tides. Correct?
Yes.
And so
Yeah, yeah. But the idea, though, is to also let go of the idea of perfection in a work, and that it has to be acid-free, archival, and last forever. And nothing really lasts forever. And I'm not really interested in that.
Right.
I mean, I'm not a stickler for having that the piece is just in perfect condition. Like those wind drawings, they were beat up, but that's another part of it, telling the story. So that those things have to happen, and those things are what's really exciting about it.
Yeah.
I find. Yeah. But yeah, the ocean tides, that was another body of work that followed the wind drawings, in that when I was making the wind drawings, I consulted with an environmental physicist at UC Irvine. And after some conversations, he indicated that the wind shares qualities with fluid, in that it moves through a space in the same way that a fluid would. And I thought that was really interesting, and I thought, since I live so close to the ocean, that I would start to think of other ways to encapsulate, maybe, look at the ocean in a different way from the traditional observational painting in the way we know it.
Right.
And so I took scrolls to the beach and watched, and decided that what I would try to do was to, with each wave that broke, I would paint a line, and depending on the height of the wave was the thickness of the line. So I would go there and sit there for sometimes full tidal cycles, 7 hours or more. And so I did drawings on that. But it was interesting that with those lines, you could actually read the sets as they came in. If you knew what I was doing, I could tell you that this was observational, and I was painting the waves as I saw them in terms of sequence and size, that you could actually read what was happening by looking at the drawings. And and knowing the
Yeah.
process.
Where'd you show that work at?
That I showed at Den Contemporary in Culver City.
yeah.
That was in 2005.
Oh, wow.
So it was a big installation where I went to the beach 130 days, consecutive days, and did these drawings.
Wow.
And they were 11-foot scrolls. And then I would, by the time the show happened, I hung them in the dynamic of a wave throughout the room. So they
Yeah.
kind of, the long scrolls kind of undulated throughout the room.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. So it was interesting. I thought, yeah, it's just another way of thinking about the landscape and trying to find that, I guess, a new aesthetic or
Yeah.
a new way to connect the two. You know, our experience of it and what it is, and how to make it come alive through painting.
Yeah. It's interesting. In 2005, I met you in 2005 or 2006, around there. I was working at Mark Moore Gallery at the time, and then you were doing these artist talks at the brewery.
Yes,
right? At
yeah,
Raid?
2010.
Was that 2010?
That's when it started.
Okay.
2010, yeah. 2010 to 2020.
Okay. All
Right at the end, it ended with the pandemic.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
And what made you? I mean, I always appreciated those. I attended a few of them, and they're always always wonderful to have. A group of your contemporaries and colleagues, sitting around in a circle and talking about various subjects within the arts. What spurred you to do that? To create that that space?
I guess again, my interest in philosophy and talking about ideas. So.
I mean, they got intense.
Yeah,
sometimes.
they did. They got really intense.
You're just like,
and
whoa.
I'll say no more on that. But they did get intense.
I just remember, okay, be kind of scared to talk sometimes because everyone just get just fully engaged, and you're like, all right,
right. But that was good. I mean, in a way, I wanted people to be excited and engaged about the topic, and so. I decided that I wanted. There were a few at Raid, and they were kind of few and far between.
Yeah.
And I decided that I wanted to make it more of a regular opportunity.
Right.
So I just started to work on that, like a part of my social practice, I guess you could say, and invite a speaker about every 7 weeks or so, to choose a topic of interest to them. And it was an artist, a curator, a writer, collector, and they would choose a topic and present it to the audience briefly, and then the floor would open up and everybody was invited to speak and contribute. And I thought it was really great, and it went on for a long time. People kept coming, and
I didn't realize it went on that long. That's amazing.
It did.
So,
yeah.
That's great.
It was really good.
It
was
was
good because I think for artists, we spend so much time alone in our studios, and particularly in Southern California, it's such a large geographical area. It's hard to get together with people and talk about art informally. And I just felt that it was something that was needed. It filled a need for the public, and it was really great. Wow. It was really great.
Yeah,
so.
Those were amazing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's
You came to a few.
Yeah, I did come to the few. Yeah, they were. Yeah, I can't remember what the topic was, but I just remember being like, "Oh my gosh, this is fantastic."
A lot of really great LA people. And,
and people who maybe not know what Raid was. Raid was a residence space that Max Presnell ran for a number of years. He's now at the Torrance Art Museum. But yeah, and it sat in the brewery, and I think it evolved into
East Side.
East
Side International.
Yeah.
So it's still a residency.
So, right.
Yeah.
So but it's a wonderful space. But anyways,
Yeah,
but that's where she hosted this talk. So, and then one thing I've always appreciated is you are, as I transitioned to the museum, I kept on seeing you coming to every exhibition, into the openings, into the talks, and I really admire that about your social practice about that. So, what drives you to continue to do that? It's supporting the artists, supporting the institution, supporting the.
Yeah, I think it's important to support each other. It's like I said earlier, it's a really difficult career choice, to spend all of your time making art and thinking about it, and it's important to get out there and talk to the people who are doing it, and people like you and artists and writers and everybody. That everybody has their own interesting perspective. and I want to know about it.
Right.
It's exciting.
Yeah. Well, I feel like every time I went to go visit you at the studio, you're like, oh, I went to this talk or I went to this symposium. And I'm like, wow, you get out there, I'm like, I wish I had that much
try.
time to do that,
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I
but
try.
you do a wonderful job. And I think it's like so important to do that, and to get out there. And it's all about, a lot of this being an artist or working within the arts is networking and building community and visiting with people, because you never know which door, who you're going to meet and which door is going to open.
Right.
I used to give
absolutely.
a talk to as an alumni talk at Biola University, my alma mater, and that was that was like the. And I always tell them, like, go to as many openings as you can and visit with as many people as you can, because you never know what what's going to open up or what opportunities are. But it's all about networking.
Oh,
Even if you're uncomfortable being amongst people, just standing in the corner, but just being there, and then you'll get to know the community more and more.
Yeah.
Show presence. So just show up.
Yeah, you find your people.
Yeah, exactly.
And we carry each other through, I think, in many ways.
Absolutely. So yes. Yeah. The question is, if you ever lost momentum in the middle of a project, or and if you have you revisited it and come back to it, or put it put it to the side for a moment and then came back?
I'd have to say not really. I don't think I've lost momentum. I mean, and maybe it's because I move from series to series. One body of work will inspire another. So I go from like momentum from one project to momentum into another project, and it just kind of snowballs that way. Over the years. That's how it's worked for me. And because I can't, or I don't know, I can't, but I never have just worked with one way of working.
Right.
Like I said, one body of work will inspire another. There will be something learned from one body of work that presents itself and opens up another facet of landscape that I'm excited about, that has potential, and I follow through. So, I mean, there has been some, maybe a few paintings that I don't know, lost my way maybe. And for me, what I've done in the past, and it seems to work, is I just put it away and turn it back to the wall or something. And then I don't revisit that for a while. And it's just amazing what having fresh eyes will do on a piece of work sometimes when you're not quite sure where to go. But I would say typically I just go from series to series, and there's always something to mine in each one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was amazing seeing the 3D works evolve, because I think when I first visited the studio, you had them on the panel, and then the next time I visited, they had come off the panel and they were just living on the wire, and then I think you were working on, you'd done the nest.
Right.
And then you were starting the bougainvillea piece, and the way sorry, you had another piece in the studio that isn't in the show, but it's also on a free, it's freestanding essentially, so.
And then having the show right now, you kind of put on a different hat and you focus more on your writing and talking with people. And so I haven't really been in the studio much since the show opened, just because I'm doing other work, for the show. And so that puts kind of a pause. So I think that when I go back to the studio and I put that hat on, that it'll be very fresh. You have a break, you step back, and I think that's always a really good thing. To have a break and not just like force something, make it happen, and just go with how you feel and how you work, and have faith in that.
Do you think you'll expand on one of these bodies of work further, like the tissue works? Will you push them even to another?
Yeah, I already have some ideas on what I want to try, and I don't know if it'll be successful. but I'll try.
But it's all about, I
It's
love
about,
accepting failure, and I
exactly.
was just talking
Failure is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Allowing it to happen, not be too hard on yourself when you're not happy, and
yeah.
it always works out. You
Yeah.
just keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always remember when I was in school, there was, remember Tim Rollins in the KOC? Remember? He was like an
I
East
don't-
Coast artist.
Okay.
But I remember he was, he was well known. And I remember he came and visited our class and telling us that our best friend should be the trash can. That you should just like trash all the works. And I was like, like aghast. I was
Yeah.
like, what? I was like, no, you keep everything,
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like everything is precious in your studio, like, everything that you make. And, I was like, yeah, you just take
Right.
everything, you just cleanse your whole studio and just throw everything that doesn't work away. And I was just like, ugh, I was like, who is this man? But anyways,
Yeah.
but there was like some truth to that about like embracing failure and,
Right,
and really like,
absolutely.
and knowing that not everything is going to be a success.
Absolutely, yeah.
And,
And being okay with it.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you never know where it's going to come back in a better way, in a better form,
Yeah.
and it's worth the wait.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, worth the wait and the pain.
Yeah, will you explore more with the Bougainvillea piece and those 3D works? Are you going to expand more on
yeah.
those? Yeah.
Mhm.
And I like the
Yeah.
way we did a presentation with the Phoenix Women, a group here at the museum, and you showed a video of you taking some of the 3D works and placing them amongst water. In a video
Oh, yes.
element. Is that is
Yeah.
video also part of your practice as well? Do you incorporate that?
Well, video, I would not consider myself a video artist
Okay.
by any stretch.
Yeah.
I a lot of times will just do it with my cell phone, but the
Yeah.
point of it is implanting, no pun intended,
Sure.
the created artist-made vines and leaves and so forth
Yeah.
back into where they were first inspired,
Yeah.
and allowing it to that immersion to take place,
Right.
and that unifying sort of idea behind painting, landscape painting, and the painting itself,
Gotcha.
the landscape itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, to allow them to interact with the environment through rain and heat and sun and sand. I've taken some of them to the ocean and allow them to kind of be washed up against the shoreline, and
Yeah.
it to me is just it's just bringing the idea of landscape painting full circle to
Yeah.
the landscape, and allowing that to happen. So it's not so much about the quality of the video recording, but it's more about capturing it in some way,
Yeah.
and saying that it's that this is part of that process.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the end, the full circle of the 3D relief paintings that they've become fully immersed in their environment.
Like putting them back into it. Why do you see that as an important part of the practice? To take them, basically, you're taking them out of their context and then creating it yourself and then putting it back. Like, why do you think it's important to put them back?
That's a good question. But I just see it in my mind that that's what needs to happen with the landscape painting that I do. That I think that idea of connection and entanglement, that it actually happens, that it's real, and that we can take that and personalize it in some way, that we embody that landscape in such a way that we can't separate ourselves from it. And I think that's the idea behind in incorporating the painting in the landscape, that it's that we have this really close connection and bond to the landscape that you can't separate it out from it. And so I think, to me, that symbolically, but it also in a literal way, brings that to life.
Yeah, because these are all these are all from memory banks. Essentially, like you taking a visual recording of what you've seen and then redoing it, and these are actually doing similar, but then actually putting it back into it. And I love that. So,
Yeah, thank you.
fantastic. Yeah.
Thanks.
So yeah, what was the inspiration behind hanging hanging two of the prints on one board, having the duality there?
Well, we wanted to have the works themselves activated in the space as opposed to having them in a more of a static position along the wall. And so we wanted to just have work on both sides so that as you walk through the space, you're always sort of not, well, confronted, but you have that opportunity to stand before the piece and get lost in it. And that's another thing, is that we hung them kind of lower on the panel so that they'd be more at human scale. So when you're standing there, you're directly facing it. It's not centered on the panel that you have to look up. That kind of removes you at a certain degree.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to activate the space and show the work in within 3 dimensions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and be able to really almost I like seeing these almost as doorways, into the space as well. You have that feel, even with the tissue works too, the way they're framed out there. They have and then those being almost like windows into something.
Like
as well.
portals.
Like
or
portals.
something.
Yeah, exactly. So, which is interesting. I think, which is a theme that runs through like color field painting too. Like through Rothko's work, even through a piece at the museum right now, Stephen Sackliner's work, whatever, he used a door frame actually within the composition of the works, like as part of the painting, so as to get a sense of a door frame that you could step into this ethereal space. So,
Right. Yeah, that's it. In terms of color field, that there's this space or field to penetrate, literally.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I chose to work with the horizon line and have those fields of color, and that you can feel like you're immersing yourself within that space, which is a really important thing I think about in terms of color field painting.
Right. Yeah. Do you have another one?
When you began working with the facial tissues, was the intention to have a gradient appear, or was that something that was a happy accident?
When I was working on these paintings, in terms of imagery, my first thought, and really the thought that carried through the process, was the landscape. So I had a landscape painting in mind. So whether it was a horizon or it was like placing myself within the space and thinking of atmospheric, what's the word? I can't think of it right now. Perspective, sorry. So, or, looking through space or looking through trees and sunlight's coming through, just different experiences that I've had with landscape and painting them. So I consider them landscape paintings, but they definitely, you could locate color field painting in them as well, I think.
Can you describe briefly, I guess, in the process of making some of the petals in the structure in the piece behind you?
Well, I work with the drying time of the paint. So I will mix the color on a surface, and I just keep working it until it starts drying to the point where I can sculpt it.
Yeah.
And depending on the weather, which is another interesting thing that happens oftentimes in my work, is if it's cold, if it's rainy, wet, it takes longer for the paint to dry, and the process is longer. And in the summer months, it dries faster. And it's a little more difficult for me because in the summer it's really hot in my studio. I don't have air conditioning, or I don't have heat. So, when Paul has come by the studio, I've got all these heaters on in the winter, and I tell him, wear a lot of layers. And
especially when it was raining, and I was like, I felt so bad because I know you were trying to finish this piece, the bougainvillea piece behind us, And yeah, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm like, how are you completing this piece? You know, it's
I
supposed to be
know.
so hard because it was constantly raining while
Yeah.
you're completing it. So
Sometimes I'd put the
yeah,
heaters
yeah.
like up on the table where I'm working so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we can get some dry, dry air coming through.
Yeah.
But
So I was trying to find the right time to come visit the studio too. Like, oh, come early in the morning because it's not as hot yet.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
or like,
yeah.
come,
You don't want to
yeah.
come in the afternoon. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So but anyway, that often factors into my work is weather conditions, and it's all good. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, do you like personally? Do you go hiking a lot, like within nature? You know, and finding places. Do you
Yeah, I
insert
mean,
yourself?
the interesting thing is, I love to travel.
Yeah.
I don't get to do it very much, but I feel satisfied that no matter where I am, I have access to the landscape. It's under my feet basically,
Yeah.
and that to me, actually, I think has been really exciting because we tend to overlook that, and there's always something interesting to mine,
Yeah.
just right wherever we may be.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's
I love that. I
yeah.
love that. 'Cause I love, yeah, even like this thinking of this came from the back fence on behind your studio.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
where the bougainvillea like naturally grows. And,
Right, yeah.
where nature kind of intersects with man-made material. So
Yeah, and then you've seen that
Yeah.
area. It's basically a parking lot.
Yeah.
And I've worked in that parking lot quite a bit. I've done the interventions there, and some
Wow.
of the work has been incorporated there, and it's inspired work. So
Yeah.
it's just a parking lot.
Yeah, and it's not, and just to kind of give a description about her studio. It's like it's a business park, so there's no nature anywhere around that facility. It's all parking lot and all little studios around there, and there's a fence probably I don't know like 200 feet from your studio door
Yeah,
around
yeah,
there.
and those big eucalyptus
the big
trees.
eucalyptus trees, yeah, that are just
Yeah.
scary when it's been super windy.
I know,
there.
yeah, definitely, I know. We've had some strong gusts where I
Yeah.
thought one of those trees could definitely come down. I'm thinking, and what work would be destroyed in here? Fortunately, I have insurance, but yeah. So fortunately, it's never happened.
That's good. Yeah. 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 And these are all taken from you flying too, right? The monoprints.
I work with a master printer in
Yeah.
Santa Fe. So he has a big print studio and a big press, and so he assists me in realizing the work. He's the technical person. I
Yeah.
mean, I've worked with printmaking, but I don't consider myself a printmaker.
Huh.
Yeah, I'm a big faker. I like to try to, I don't know, experiment, employ various processes,
Yeah.
and break the rules. I'm not a purist.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I would think that people from various watercolor societies would be horrified by what I do with the tissues and watercolor painting. But yeah, I'm not worried about that. I like to break the rules.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing. It's healthy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
To a point. You don't want to go to jail. But yeah. But anyway, yeah, I like to.
Yeah. How many times have you gone to Santa Fe to make these? Just
Oh,
once?
several times.
Several times?
We've been working together since the early 2000s.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
How'd you meet
long
him?
time.
What's his name?
Ron Pocrasso.
Oh, okay.
And he is, I met him through Riverside Art Museum way
okay.
back when. He was doing a workshop, and,
Yeah.
and we just continued to work together over the years.
Yeah. And how did you decide to do these as monoprints? Did you ever think of another type of paint application that would create this type of surface and print and how you wanted to achieve this?
No.
No?
No, I mean, I've been working on these prints. They've evolved
Right.
over time, and initially they were much smaller.
Okay.
They were 22 by 30 size, and
Huh.
these are 66 by 36,
Wow.
give or take. And I like the larger format.
Yeah.
I think it works better for what I'm trying to achieve with this color, I hate to keep using the word color
Sure,
field
no.
space, but this
Yeah.
deep space in
Yeah.
landscape. And so, yeah, and I don't feel like I've run dry with that yet. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Can you go bigger, or is there a limitation to how big you can go?
Well, it depends. You have to find a bigger press.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Does he have various sizes?
This is about as big as we could go.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I have done some where there are triptychs.
Oh, okay.
So there's 3 of them
Right.
across, or yeah.
Was this one of the triptychs, the one behind us? Or no?
Yes, and
Is
there's
that-
a third
there's
one.
a third one?
There's
Okay.
a third one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool.
So yeah, there's ways to get to make it happen.
Yeah.
If I wanted to work larger.
Yeah.
So
Very cool. Do you have more questions? Yeah.
A couple quick ones, I think. Is there an artist that you particularly find inspiring or that has inspired you throughout your journey with art?
a particular artist. Oh, there's so many. I could never say one or two. I appreciate what artists try to achieve in their work, and they all come to it in their own unique individual way. So I couldn't say one or two. I love art history, and I love reading art history. So, yeah.
Do you have a favorite art history book that you go to, or writing that you go to?
No, I wouldn't say if.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I read a lot of biographies
Yeah.
on artists.
Or
and-
one that sticks out to you that comes off the top of your head, like, oh, I really enjoyed that one.
Well, let's see. I'm reading one right now on Cubism and the Trump Loya tradition
Ooh.
that I think the Met put out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's a really dense book, but I'm really enjoying it. It's taking me a while to go through it, but
Yeah.
it's really, really good. It's on Cubism and Braque, Gris, Picasso, but their influences and how it sort of all began with commercial production and decorative arts.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
I know. I
So
just
it
was
was
looking through my library. I just found this book. I didn't even know I had. It was Giacometti and interviews with Giacometti and Samuel Beckett, which I'm excited to get into.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like,
I love Giacometti.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I wonder what this is about. But I don't know. It's like one of the things like I didn't know you even had this. So I'm excited to jump into that.
Yeah.
See what it's about.
There's I visited this small town in northern Italy, Fiesole, and it's I stumbled across these little sculptures there, and they remind me so much of Giacometti's sculptures. Next time you come down, I'll
Yeah.
show you.
Okay.
But they're Etruscan funerary objects,
Oh, okay.
and I often wonder if Giacometti was inspired by that
Oh,
work.
maybe.
Yeah. But anyway,
Maybe if he mentions that, I'll let you know.
yeah, yeah. But I'll show you next time since you're reading that book.
Yeah. I just pulled it out the other day. I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta check this out. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's very thin. So yeah.
And then last audience question, is there a medium that you refuse to work
Ooh,
with?
good question.
Or that you have been putting off working with?
No, I'm open to whatever I feel like I could do. I mean, if there's some inspiration there, I'll try it. Yeah, I'll do it. I'll follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Right?
I know it is.
Be open. I had never worked with sculpture before, and it just evolved. And I was thinking of paint as a sculptural medium because of the subject matter, because of landscape. And landscape is always there for me, and that's what I always go to find inspiration. And whatever that concept is, it kind of leads me to the medium, and I follow through. And but I have not worked with sculpture before, but I'm finding that I really do like it. But I consider them relief paintings.
Okay.
Relief paintings,
Yeah.
Maybe sculpture, but working three-dimensionally with paint. Yeah.
Yeah.
But did that answer your question?
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Virginia. It's been
Thank
wonderful
you.
to have you.
It's been really fun.
Good to chat with you as always.
yeah.
So Virginia's show, Transitory Nature, will run until July. What is
9th.
it? July 9th. And the hours for LBMA are from 11 to 4 p.m. Thursday through Sunday. So, and Virginia, you're here some of the time on Saturdays and Fridays,
Yes,
correct?
right.
And she'll post that on her
I'll post
Instagram.
when I'm going to be
Yeah.
here if somebody wants to talk.
Yeah,
and-
but Virginia's been very generous with her time, and and so it's really wonderful to have you here and visiting, intermittently throughout the run of the exhibition. So, but yeah, thank you again. Thank you to everybody who
Thank
tuned
you.
in.
It was great.
It's wonderful to have. Thank you for the wonderful questions as well. So, yeah,
Thank you,
until
Paul.
next time. You're welcome. Thank you.